We are now just 1 day away from the start of the 2023-24 NHL regular season, so I wanted to get in at least one more Ask Me Anything episode before the season starts, kind of overreact to the preseason a little bit. Before we get started, there's a couple of things I want to say. First off, to all my Canadian viewers out there, happy Canadian Thanksgiving. I hope you all have a fantastic day, eat some good food, spend time with the people you're thankful for. I hope you all know how thankful I am for all of you and how excited I am to talk hockey with you guys on here for another season. Another thing, if you guys haven't already, be sure to go ahead and subscribe to my second channel. The link to it is always at the top of the description of every video I post over here. I know I haven't uploaded on that channel in a couple of months, but it's been the off season, and during the off season I find it hard enough to come up with the videos for this channel, so took a break from that channel for a bit. But with the regular season starting, it's going to be back in full force. And of course, if this is your first time checking out this channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get this episode started with the first question from FU2NV Family 17, who says, do you think that Slavkovsky can really make that jump in the 2023-24 season with a 40-50 point year? And also, really appreciate the kind words. I'm glad you like the videos. I'm going to go with yes. I definitely think Slavkovsky is going to take a pretty significant jump this season. Had just 10 points last year in 39 games. Obviously went down with injury. I thought Slavkovsky had a positive preseason this year. Wasn't anything special, but he was good in most of the games that he got into. He scored some goals. He was productive. This is now the second training camp and preseason that Yuri Slavkovsky has gone through. He knows what to expect at the NHL level. He's healthy heading into the season. Slavkovsky is expected to get consistent minutes in the top 6 power play time with his skill set and the potential of him playing with the likes of an Alex Newhook or Kirby Dach. If he stays healthy and plays north of 70 games, I don't see any reason why Slavkovsky can't put together a 15 to 20 goal, 40-ish point season. The next question we have comes from Hugh Barkhurst, who says, if I'm not mistaken, last season was Erik Karlsson's first season in San Jose without Brent Burns. You are correct, which may have played a role in his huge bounce back season, seeing as he had the dance floor all to himself. However, could you see a potential issue resurfacing now that he'll be playing with Letang? So this is actually a very interesting point to bring up, and it's something that I never thought of. I don't really think Brent Burns leaving had a massive factor in Erik Karlsson's, huge Norris Trophy winning 100 point season. I think the biggest thing was just he was finally 100% healthy as a member of the San Jose Sharks. He played in all 82 games after playing in just 211 games through his first 4 seasons as a member of the Sharks. As far as could it be an issue with him now going to Pittsburgh and playing with somebody like Chris Letang, I don't think so. As long as you give Erik Karlsson the keys to the top power play unit, which the Penguins have done, he's been playing in that role throughout the preseason. Do I think Erik Karlsson is going to have another 100 plus point season? Probably not. I feel like we're going to see his numbers come down a little bit, but this is a guy that I'm fully expecting to still be up there, around a point per game as long as he stays healthy. There's obviously going to be a lot more talent around Erik Karlsson on the Pittsburgh Penguins than there was, this past season on the San Jose Sharks, which may even allow Erik Karlsson to play a lot more freely. There won't be such a focus on shutting down Erik Karlsson this season as there was obviously this past season when on most nights he was the Sharks' only source of offense. Moving along to the next question, this one comes from Connor McDrysaddle, who says the number of 100 point scores has consistently gone up by 2 to 3 each full season. Last year there were 11. How many 100 point scores do you think there will be this season? And also, really appreciate the kind words. This is something that I feel like is almost impossible to predict just because you don't know which guys are going to go down with injury and miss a lot of time and things like that. There is a handful of players that had 100 points last season that I don't expect to hit that number again, but then again there's also a handful of players that didn't have 100 points that I think will have 100 points this season. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw a guess out there. I'm going to round the number up to an even number and say there will be 12 100 point scores in the 2023-24 season. The next question we have comes from Quentum. Hopefully I'm saying that properly. Does Danielson push one of Veleno, Kostin, or Soderblom off the lineup opening night? He's looked really comfortable in the preseason and has been getting looks with both squads, and I could see a Raymond scenario unfolding here where he surprises everyone with consistent strong play. I'm recording this video a little bit later than I expected. Some things came up over the past couple of days, so we actually already have learned that Nate Danielson has indeed been sent back to the WHL. I do agree with you. I think Nate Danielson did look very comfortable during the preseason. Not only his play away from the puck I was impressed with, but he was really productive as well. He was putting up points throughout the entire preseason. If this was the Red Wings of 2 to 3 years ago, I think without a doubt Danielson makes the opening night lineup, but the Red Wings have a logjam up front. They have an abundance of depth. depth. That's not where this team is hurting. It's the lack of top end talent, I feel like, is the biggest concern with the Red Wings heading into this season. So while yes, I was really impressed with Nate Danielson throughout the preseason, and I thought he looked really good and made a case to make the opening night lineup, I don't think he was so good where, it was just undeniable and he forced the Red Wings' hand and he had to be in the lineup. A guy who you mentioned in this question, in Elmer Soderblom, he didn't even make the opening night lineup. He was sent down to Grand Rapids along with somebody like Jonathan Berggren, which was a big surprise to me. He scored 15 goals in 67 games with the Wings this past season. So I feel like that kind of just speaks to how much competitiveness there was during training camp and preseason for spots on the Red Wings opening night lineup, especially in the bottom six. Another season in the WHL is not going to hurt Nate Danielson whatsoever. He should go down there, dominate for a year. Hopefully the Brandon Wheat Kings are a much better team. If not, I'd like to see him get traded to a contender down there in the WHL and have a chance to go on a playoff run. But based on what we saw from Nate Danielson during the preseason, how strong of a 200-foot game he already has, the fact that he plays a premium position and a position of need for the Red Wings at center, he's somebody that I think is in really good shape to make the lineup next season. Moving along now to the next question, do you think the Ducks made the right decision in giving Zegras, Drysdale bridge deals instead of a long-term contract? On one hand, it's less money to pay the two right now, but you also most likely have to give them even more than what you would have given them with a long-term deal now versus when their current deal ends. It's hard to say they made the wrong decision in giving them bridge deals because this is clearly what Pat Verbeek wanted to do. He wanted to see more from each of these players before he locks them up to big money long-term deals. He wants a bigger sample size to truly see what kind of players that Jamie Drysdale and Trevor Zegras are and are going to be, which I think makes sense. But like you said, if, Drysdale and Zegras really explode over these next couple of seasons and break out into superstars, you're gonna have to back up the Brinks truck for both of them and give them a lot more money, like you said, than you would have had to if you would have given them a long-term contract now, as opposed to when their current bridge deals end. The only thing I can say for sure about Drysdale and Zegras' contracts is it's just a good thing that the Ducks got these guys signed before the regular season began, because for a while there it was looking like these negotiations were going to bleed into the regular season, and that's never a good thing. The next question we have comes from Captain Jack Lope, who says, how much stock do you put in preseason performances? Preseasons across most sports are usually given little to no weight since the games don't count and most teams don't play their starters. But due to requirements for playing veterans and the trimming down of training camp rosters, it looks like we're seeing something close to what most teams will be running with on opening night. Should we be thinking more about what we're seeing right now? So basically the way I look at preseason is wins and losses, it really does not matter at all. I put absolutely zero stock into wins and losses during the preseason, even if it's a game where, say, one team has what is mostly going to be their NHL opening night roster against a team full of prospects. Even if the team full of prospects beats that team full of NHLers, I don't really think that's a big deal either. I don't put a lot of stock in that because you have a bunch of NHL veterans who are basically locks to make an NHL team against guys that are fighting for roster spots, guys that are just dying to make the NHL. So when I'm watching NHL preseason games, really what I'm looking for is just how well prospects perform, especially guys, coming over from overseas, getting their first taste of action in North America. How do they adapt to the North American ice surface and style of play? Things like that. Another thing I think you can put some stock into is how special teams look, power play, penalty kill, what type of systems are in place, that kind of thing. In my opinion, though, the NHL preseason is way too long. Like the Red Wings played 8 preseason games. I think that should honestly be cut in half, maybe just have like 4 or 5. The first couple of preseason games are fun because we've been starved for hockey for so long through the summer, but once you're into the 6th, 7th, 8th preseason game, you're just ready for the regular season. So I hope they cut it down in the next few years, but they probably won't. This next question comes from Hayden Hallett, who says, with how well Fraser Minten has played in the preseason, do you think he will not only make the Leafs opening night roster, but will play most of the season with them too? So as of the time I'm recording this, the Leafs have yet to put out their final roster for opening night, but with how well Fraser Minten played during the preseason and based off some of the moves the Leafs have been making, trading Sam Lafreniere to the Canucks for a 5th round draft pick, I think there's a good chance we see Minten in the Leafs opening night lineup. Fraser Minten was definitely the biggest story for the Maple Leafs throughout the preseason and training camp. Heading into this season, I don't think anybody would have expected this guy to even make a push for the opening night lineup, let alone make the lineup. And if you ask me, for a team like the Maple Leafs, I think this is something that they honestly desperately needed. A player coming into training camp and just surprising everybody everybody, making the team, somebody who's dying to play in the NHL, somebody you know is going to give it their all every single shift. Stuff like this can definitely inject life into a locker room and give a team a massive boost of energy. Matthew Knies and Fraser Minten obviously looked fantastic together throughout the preseason, having a top six as stacked as the Leafs have, and then a third line potentially of Fraser Minten, Matthew Knies, and Calle Jarnkrok. I mean, that sounds like an absolutely lethal top nine. I think Fraser Minten and Matthew Knies' games really complement each other well. They both play with, high energy. They have some bite through the game, but also some offensive flair there as well. I really do think the Leafs should, at the very least, have Fraser Minten in the opening night lineup, give him his 9 games at the NHL level, and then kind of assess what to do, once you get to that point. Once those 9 games are up, then you can revisit this conversation. But based on what we saw in the preseason, I think this is somebody who definitely should be in the Leafs opening night lineup. And also for a team that's as cap strapped as the Leafs are, he's cheap too. He's on an ELC, so that definitely helps. Next up, this question comes from NL Content, who says, how has Connor Bedard's preseason performance been so far, with 1 goal being an empty netter? So Connor Bedard was obviously a player under the microscope during the preseason, and although he just scored 1 goal and it was on an empty netter, I thought Connor Bedard looked like he belonged and then some. His playmaking ability was definitely on display. He had that beautiful assist in overtime of, I believe it was his first preseason game. He set up Athanasiou in overtime for the winner. Had a couple of highlight reel end-to-end rushes where he would undress players and get a scoring chance. Didn't finish those plays, but you can see what makes Connor Bedard so special. It was on display throughout the entire preseason. His offensive analytics in pretty much every single game that I've seen them of were fantastic, like his expected goals for percentage and stuff like that. He's gonna be amazing. I would not be concerned in the slightest bit about Bedard's only preseason goal being an empty netter. I thought he looked fantastic. The next question we have comes from the Basil Man, who says, well, we already know your favorite team in the Atlantic Division is obviously Detroit. What are your favorite teams from each of the other divisions? So I'm not really somebody who has multiple favorite teams. Aside from Detroit, really I just root for my friends' favorite teams. I have a friend who's a diehard Leafs fan, a friend who's a diehard Panthers fan, so that kind of sucks, both those teams in the Red Wings division. And then I have 2 other buddies who follow hockey really closely. They're brothers, and their favorite teams are Colorado and Winnipeg, so those are kind of the Western Conference teams that I root for. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Hattrick Kane, who says, do you think Lafreniere will get traded out of New York this year? Man, I know I just said I don't put a lot of stock into preseason performances if it's not prospects, rookies, that kind of thing, but Lafreniere's preseason performance I do think is a little bit concerning. This is somebody who should have came out flying for somebody who was a first overall draft pick, such a hyped up prospect, has had a really underwhelming first few seasons in the NHL, and during this preseason Lafreniere was just downright bad. And even going back to the first round of the playoffs against the Devils, he was bad in that series as well. You have to wonder when the Rangers are going to run out of patience when it comes to Lafreniere. Obviously the preseason may not matter at all. 2 weeks from now we could be looking at Lafreniere as getting off to an extremely hot start, sticking in the top 6, that kind of thing, and this conversation won't matter. But if he gets off to a slow start to the season, you have to wonder if the New York Rangers are going to start exploring some other options. The next question we have comes from Farmer Brown, who says, Zach Benson is obviously making the Sabres, and since you made this comment, it has been confirmed he is in the Sabres opening night lineup. Why do short players always drop in the draft when it's pretty obvious they will become very good players? Benson, Caulfield, and Alex DeBrincat. I feel like this is something that's just always going to happen, no matter how many times GMs are proven wrong. They're always going to look at size and be like, well, sure, he's able to dominate in junior, collegiate hockey, wherever he plays, but being that small, is their game going to translate to the NHL? And when it comes to players like Cole Caulfield, like Alex DeBrincat, and like Zach Benson, when you're that talented, size really doesn't matter. When you're that skilled of a player, you're going to be able to adapt no matter where you're playing. And yeah, Zach Benson at 13th overall already looks like an amazing draft pick for the Buffalo Sabres. Players drafted outside of the top 10 rarely ever make the NHL in their first season, so this is already a massive step in the right direction for Zach Benson, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he performs, through the first 9 games of the season, and see if he sticks on the Buffalo Sabres for the entire year. This next comment comes from Ryan Plunkett Hockey, who says, how do you think the Dustin Wolf situation will play out in Calgary? So yeah, Dustin Wolf sent back down to the AHL. Calgary is going to start the season with Markstrom and Vladar as their 1-2 punch in net. I've seen a lot of Flames fans who are pretty upset about this. Obviously, Dustin Wolf is viewed as the future in net for the Calgary Flames. The man has just dominated no matter where he's played since being drafted in the 7th round by the Flames in 2019. He's won CHL Goaltender of the Year, AHL Rookie of the Year, AHL goaltender of the year. He's played one NHL game. He won that game and put up a .958 save percentage. At what point do you look at Dustin Wolf and say this guy's too good to play anywhere else other than the NHL? His AHL numbers over the last 2 seasons are just absolutely ridiculous. I can see why some Flames fans are upset about this decision, especially with how the goaltending went for the Calgary Flames this past season. Markstrom and Bedard weren't great. I think what it really comes down to is just the fact that Dustin Wolf is waiver exempt, and I really don't think it's anything other than that. His time is definitely going to come though, and when it does, I think he's going to be well worth the wait for Calgary Flames fans. Moving along now, this next question comes from Billy O'Brien, who says, with Andre Vasilevskiy injured at 10 to 12 weeks with the back surgery and the amount of depth the Tampa Bay Lightning lost, does this hurt their chances for the playoffs this season? I think without a doubt it does, especially with how tough the Atlantic Division is expected to be. Going into the season with Jonas Johansson as your starting goaltender, you know, that's not great. And yes, it is just 10 to 12 weeks, but if they fall behind in the playoff race with, again, how good the Atlantic is expected to be, it might be too big of a hole for them to dig themselves out of when Vasilevskiy comes back. Now, the Lightning are still a very good team on paper. Even with the depth they lost, I think they should be able to at least stay afloat while Vasilevskiy is out. I'm really curious to see if Tampa decides to just roll with Jonas Johansson, or maybe they try to make a move, whether that's via trade or claim a goaltender off waivers. It's definitely not an ideal situation though for the Lightning, and I think it makes the playoff race in the Atlantic Division this season that much more interesting. The next question we have comes from Eliminator, who says, did you get to go see the Pens Sens preseason game in Halifax? I did not actually. I missed out on getting tickets when they initially dropped, and the resale prices were just absurd, like $400 to $600 for a preseason game. No shot I'm doing that. I was very content with just, sitting at home watching it on my TV. And now for the final question of this episode. This one comes from Alexis Fillion. Hopefully I'm saying that name properly. Do you see Taylor Hall bouncing back with Bedard and getting a crazy season like he did in 2017-18 when he won the Hart? If you do, what do you think will be his numbers? And also, really appreciate the support. I'm glad you like the videos. I don't think we're going to see Hall have a season like the one he had when he won the Hart Trophy with the Devils, but I think we're probably going to see him put up the most points we've seen him in quite some time. He's going from being more of a complimentary player with the Boston Bruins to now being a legit top line guy on the Blackhawks. He's going to be on their first line with Bedard, getting top power play minutes, and I think Bedard and Hall looked good together during the preseason. I think Taylor Hall's skill set will complement Connor Bedard very well. I'm excited to see what kind of numbers these guys put up during the regular season. I wouldn't be surprised to see Taylor Hall maybe in the range of 75 to 80 points. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Ask Me Anything series, and somehow my neighbor's dog has managed to bark through the entirety of me recording this, so I apologize if you can hear that in the background. As always, I want to say a huge shout out and thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. Even the ones that don't get featured in the video, just know I read every single one and I appreciate you guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support, and keep an eye out on the community tab. Now with the regular season starting, I plan on having this back to being a weekly series like we do for the most part during the regular season. And lastly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.